All right, this is going to be a really quick, like 10-minute tutorial to get you up and running with executing Python code and writing Python code on your machine. So the first thing that we need is a plain text editor in order to write our code. You can't write code in Microsoft Word. You have to use some other sort of more simple, shall we say, text editor. So we are using one that's called Atom that you can download at atom.io. There are a few other ones, Sublime Text people like. People also like Visual Studio Code. So if you get any of those three, they're all good. They all have their ups and downs, and you'll be able to execute Python code in all of them. So let's write our first Python program. So when you are learning to program, I think you are legally obligated to have your very first program print out the phrase "Hello World." So you are bringing this beautiful program into the world. So here's how we're going to do it in Python. Print "Hello World." Pretty simple. Now, pay close attention to the fact that this is all boring and gray right now. I'm going to save this file. I'm going to save it to my desktop, which is generally a terrible place to put things, but I'll do it anyway. And I'm going to call it intro.py. Make sure it has a .py extension, because that's what tells your computer that this is a Python file. So we're going to save it, and then suddenly, look at that, it's all fun and colorful. This is called syntax highlighting. And syntax highlighting is really good for letting you tell apart different sections of your code, the fact that this part here is different from this part here, and it's also really good for letting you know when you have errors in your code. So even if it doesn't come out and tell you you're doing something wrong, it's really going to imply, hey, maybe you should take another look at this. So in order to run our program, we need to get to the terminal, to the command line. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the magnifying glass, we're going to search for terminal, and we're going to run it. So this is the terminal, also known as the shell, also known as the command line, also known as 100 other things. It's a text-based, really intimate way to get involved with the insides of your computer. Now in theory, this is an extension from a class I taught in real life, so you know how to move around on the command line. But for now, we're just going to do this. We're going to cd desktop to change the directory to be in the desktop, so that now we can see intro.py. Now we're going to run this file. We're going to run this file by typing python intro.py. We run it and it prints "Hello World." How amazing, how cool, how fun. We're amazing geniuses. Now, one thing that becomes important is there are actually multiple versions of Python, and one of them is better than the other one. When you run python intro.py, what you're saying is, hey Python, take this file called intro.py and run it like it's computer code. And then Python says, okay, that's fun. But the version of Python that we're using is Python 2.7. Now, Python 2.7 came out in like 2000, and then Python 3 came out in 2008, and Python 3 is way better than Python 2, despite the fact that on your computer, the default Python is Python 2. Now, there are a million ways to install Python 3, but I did install it on this computer, and I installed it to the command Python 3. So I'm going to say Python whenever I run code, but I'm actually specifically using the Python 3 command. It's basically the same. It's going to do all the same stuff, but further down the road, if you're using Python 3, you'll run into fewer problems than if you're using Python 2. So we're always going to be using Python 3 intro.py. Let's get back to our code. So one of the things that you want to do whenever you're programming is take notes and keep notes for yourself, because when you go back and look at your code, you're not going to remember what anything does. So the way that you write notes to yourself is through things called comments. You make a comment by putting a pound symbol or a hash at the beginning of your line and then just typing a bunch of text. So this is a comment. We are printing things to the screen. Save it, run our code, and it's just ignores these two lines and then runs the print "Hello World." Now, we can mix things up a little bit. If we do print "Hello World" with single quotes instead of double quotes, ends up doing the exact same thing. We could also do hello plus world. We can add things together. That looks good, except there's not a space between hello and world. So there isn't a space between hello and world. What we're going to do now, this is running off the side of the page. I'm going to turn on something called soft wrap, which will make it automatically go down to the next line. If you want to add that space, you have to add it manually. You have to put a space in before world. Another thing you can do is print hello, comma, world. Comma is probably the best way to do these things, just because it will keep you, well, you'll see it in a little bit. All right, now this is Python dealing with text in a very boring way. Text in a programming language is something called a string. Text is called strings. Strings have quote marks around them. So hello, hello, these are all strings. The magic of a computer, though, is that it's really, really good at math. So thankfully, if we print 10, if we run this code, it will print 10. We can also print 10 plus 10. What will it print? Yes, it will print 20. Amazing. Good work. Good work programming. Print 200 times 20. Wonderful, 4,000. Now, let's break things for a little bit. How about some errors? Now, the number one thing that's going to happen to you when you are programming is you're going to run into problems because you type something wrong or you don't know how the coding works or whatever. It's like 80% of your time is trying to find out the bugs in your code. So let's say we did this. If we did 10 in quotation marks plus 10 without quotation marks. So even though this looks like a number, Python says it's a string. It's the same as typing hello. It just happens to be a 1 and then a 0. So if you add it to the number 10, what are you going to get? Are you going to get 1010? Are you going to get 20? What could it be? Let's save. I'm pushing up in order to go to my last command so I don't have to type all of this again. So you can do that too. All right, so it printed, and then we get our very first Python error. So it says traceback, most recent call last, file intro.py, line 21 in module, prints 10 plus 10, type error, can't convert int object to str implicitly. So whenever you are getting an error in Python, generally the error message will be down at the bottom. So this is the actual error that we're getting. And then above it, it will say where we are getting this error and the line that it's happening on. So we are inside of the file intro.py and the error is on line 21. We can look and see line 21 here, but it also is friendly enough to show us what line 21 looks like. The biggest issue is not reading your error messages. 90% of the time, if you read your error messages, you will be able to find out the solution to your problem without having to ask somebody for help yourself. Don't just run into an error, freak out, and then be like, oh no, I'm terrible at programming, this is bad, I'll never be good at this. Throw your computer into a fire, stomp on it a little bit. Don't do that. You have it in you. You have it in you. And all you do as a computer programmer is there's this really helpful thing that you can do when you run into problems, and it is called Googling. Whenever you run into a problem, after you look at it and try to read it and try to understand it, put it into Google. You'll notice the first 3 results here are from a domain called Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is a question and answer site for programming, and it has every single error that has ever happened, thousands of times. You will be on Stack Overflow a lot as a programmer trying to solve problems. And the way that it's set up is at the very top, you have someone who's asking a question, and then down at the bottom, people upvote and downvote answers. So in theory, you find the answer with the green check mark, and hopefully there's something in that code that applies to your problem. Now, what we are going to do here is we're going to read it, our error message, and we're going to try to understand it. Type error can't convert int object to str implicitly. I'm going to paste it over here. Let's try to understand what we can. Type error, I don't know what that means. Can't convert int, let's keep going, object to str implicitly. So str is like a word that we just learned, which is string. So str probably means string. Can't convert int object to str implicitly. This here is our string. This over here is our int. Well, it's a number, int, maybe int means integer. So what it's saying is, hey, you have a string, you have an integer, you cannot put those together. Two ways we could fix that. What it wants is either two integers or two strings. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to say, convert this 10 into an integer. Ta-da! So this becomes the integer 10, and this becomes the integer 10, and then they add up to be 20. We could also do print, and we'll print, if we did the 10 plus 10 again, instead of converting this first number to an integer, we can convert the second number into a string. We run it. Hey, and then we get 10, 10 because it's adding them together in the same way as hello world. Now, if you notice, there end up being a lot of brackets that show up here, a lot of parentheses. Now, a lot of your errors aren't going to be errors in terms of like can't convert int object to str implicitly. A lot of your errors are going to be something like this. This looks like normal, good, pleasant, friendly code. We run it, and we get syntax error, unexpected EOF while parsing, which is a terrible, terrible, terrible error message. We look at our code, we go to line 30, and there's no error. Well, the error is on line 30 in theory, but there's no code on line 30. So what that probably means is the error happened on the line before it. We're going to stare forever looking at this, but the problem is that this str has an open parenthesis and a closed parenthesis. You can actually see them both highlighted. You can see the pairs highlighted when in one of the pairs. You can see it up here too. This pair and that, or this parenthesis, that parenthesis, this parenthesis, that parenthesis. Now, if you think you might have an issue with parentheses, it helps to kind of click around on all the parentheses and make sure everything has a match. So we click here, we see there's a match. We click here, nope, no highlight under that parenthesis. Ta-da! We fix it at the end. We add it there, so now it has a buddy, and we can run it, and we no longer have an error. Another way, another problem that you'll run into is, let's say we do hello world here. We run this, everything looks fine. If we get rid of that quotation mark there, and we try to run our code, it will say invalid syntax, which is just, invalid syntax is the worst error message. It just means you have an error. So what you have to get used to looking for is making sure all of your colors match. There's probably a better way to do this, but for me, if I don't see this text being green, it automatically sets off an alarm in my brain saying, oh, we probably messed up our quotation mark somewhere. So we run it again. Beautiful, everything's good. Very nice. So now let's get some input from the user and do something with it. Getting user input. So one thing we can do is store information that we have. So my name is Soma, and I can say this. What is this going to print? Is this the same thing as doing print hello name? No. No. What's going to happen is I'm taking the string Soma and I'm putting it inside of this variable called name. It's called a variable because it can vary in what it means. So I'm taking Soma, I'm putting it into name, and then I'm printing hello name. Save, run, hello Soma. You do the same thing like this. The number is 10. I can print 2 times the number. What is 2 times the number 10? It should be 20. Run my code. Ta-da! It's 20. All right. So now that we have stored things in variables, it's more fun to get information from the person that you are running your code. So let's do this. First name equals input. What is your first name? Terrible at typing down there. So I can just print first name. I'm going to run, and it's going to say, what is your first name? And I'm going to say, Jonathan. Enter, and then it prints Jonathan. That's not very friendly, though. When you meet someone, you know, someone says, what's your name? You say Jonathan. They say, hello, Jonathan. Nice to meet you. So we're going to change this to, hello, first name. Nice to meet you. So first it'll print hello, then it'll print whatever first name is. First name is the input that we got from the user. Then it's going to say nice to meet you. Very polite program. First name is Jonathan. Hello, Jonathan. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Intro.py. So this is where you're going to run into problems with integers and strings and things like this. Now, if I say, how old are you? I'm going to get a number back, right? You are age years old. What is your first name? Jonathan. How old are you? 12. I'm 12 years old. Now, what year were you born in if you're 12 years old? Well, let's just say 2017 minus age. So if you were 12 years old, you're born in 2005, you were born in year. Sounds reasonable enough. Jonathan, how old am I? 12. All right. We get another error message. Type error. Unsupported operand types for subtraction sign, int and str. Okay, we had an error message earlier on that involved an int and an str. Can't convert int object to str implicitly. That was when we tried to add a 10 that was a string and a 10 that was not a string. So this is the same sort of error, right? We're trying to do something with an integer. We're trying to do something with a string. It's on line 47, this line right here. So 47, this one right here. So we know that 2017 is a string. No, we know that 2017 is an integer because it's just a number. It's also the same color as all the other integers. And then we have age. Now, age, I typed in 12, right? Typed in 12, said I was 12 years old. The issue is that anything that the user types in, Python just assumes that it's a string. So this is like saying year equals 2017 minus 12 in quotes. So Python assumes user input is a string. So what we need to do, let's replace this line, and we'll take 12, and what we need to do is take this 12 that is a string and convert it into an integer. This is called casting. Cast the string into an integer. And we can look at how we did it before. Generally what you'll be doing when you just first start programming is not remembering anything, which is why you should keep a lot of notes about how to do things, right? So we go back and we see, oh, okay, we do this int thing in order to take a string and turn it into an integer. So we go down here and we say int, it will hug age, and then it will turn age into an integer. We run this code. My name is Jonathan. I'm 12 years old. I was born in 2005. Hooray, wonderful. All right. Now that we have some information, now that we can kind of play with numbers a little bit, the next thing that you want to be able to do, the final thing we're going to do in this tutorial, is something called if statements. If statements, or also conditionals. So conditionals are ways to kind of go down different paths based on what's going on. What we're going to do is see if the person who is typing into this can vote or not. So we have the person's age right here. If someone is over 17 years old, they can vote. So if age is greater than 17, print you can vote. Else print you cannot vote. Now, if you've been paying attention, we've run into problems a lot when we've been trying to use this age variable. I guess only one problem. But the problem was when we were trying to use an integer along with age because age is still a string. So we're going to try this out and we're going to see what happens. What's my first name? Jonathan. I'm 12. Unorderable types, string is greater than integer, and we say, oh, right, treat this as an integer. Save, run it again. I cannot vote because I'm only 12 years old. Let's try it again. Jonathan, how old am I? 25. I can vote. All right, now let's look at how this thing called an if statement is put together. Now, usually when you have an if statement, there's two parts. There's an if, and then there's an else. There doesn't really even need to be an else, but you say if this thing is true, then do this. Now, important things to note. You will always forget to put this colon on the end of the line. Python will remind you. Here, let's see what happens if we do that. I'm going to get rid of this else statement. So first, let me just run this. My name is Jonathan. I'm 20 years old. I can vote. I'm going to get rid of that, save it, run it. Syntax error, invalid syntax. So it says, sometimes syntax errors are fun because they use this little caret here, this little up arrow, to point at where the issue is. So syntax error, invalid syntax, right at that 7. Now it's not saying the 7 is a problem, it's saying that error is somewhere around there. And so what the error is whenever we use a conditional, whenever we use an if, we have to have a colon at the end of the line. So I'm going to add the colon back. Jonathan, 20, I can vote. Now the next important thing is you need to have this tab space in here. You need to have, it's either a tab or it's 4 spaces. I usually use 4 spaces, but this is, I just opened up this text editor, so I didn't set it. Now, it will execute everything that is indented every time if this person is above 18. If this condition is true, it will run all 3 of these. Print, we are done. So what's going to happen here is if someone's over 17, it will run all 3 of these. If someone is not above 17, it's going to skip all of this and go right down to here. I'm 20. Great. It says I can vote, it says I'm pretty old, and it says all of these numbers, and then finally it says we are done. But let's say well, let's run it again. Let's do it for young people. I'm 12. Now it says the year I was born, and then it just says we're done. So last time, it said all of this up here. It said when I was born, it said I could vote, it said I was old, it counted all these numbers, it said we are done. This time, it just says the year I was born, and then it says we are done. So it skips all of this. Now, if I unindent this, and I say I'm 12, is it going to run? It's still squashed up against this code right here. It's just not indented. Let's see what happens. Jonathan, I'm 12 years old. And yes, it does print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what you want to do is everything you want to have happen for this needs to be indented. And there are else statements. Else statements are just what happens if this is not true. So the way this will work is if you're older than 17, it will say this. Otherwise, it will say that. Jonathan, 12, so then it'll print, you cannot vote. One thing to be careful of is, let's say I want to check for people who are 33. You have a Smashing Pumpkins song. If you want to know whether something is equal to something else, you have to use double equals. You can't just use a single equals, it will break your code. You have to use doubles. We run this. Jonathan, I'm 33. I have a Smashing Pumpkins song. I run it again. My name is Jonathan. I'm 12. I can't vote. You can also string together a bunch of else's using something called elif. So what this is going to do is going to go through these one at a time until Python will go through these one at a time until it finds one that's true. It will do that and it will skip everything else. So I'm going to run this again. Jonathan, and I'm going to say I am 18 years old. Well, let's go with 20. It's a little further up. So what Python is going to do, it's going to say, is your age 33? No, my age is 20. Otherwise, is your age above 17? Yes, it's 20. So it should probably say you can vote. Great, it does say you can vote. And if we do this again, and I say I'm 33, it only says you have a Smashing Pumpkins song. So it doesn't also tell me I can vote. So anytime you do if, an elif, an else, it's just the first one that's true that is going to run. So if this one's true, it'll do this. It won't do anything else. A problem will come up if you do things in the wrong order as a result. So if I do it this way, if I'm above 17, it'll say you can vote. Otherwise, if my age is 33, it'll say you have a Smashing Pumpkins song. Otherwise, print you cannot vote. Run it. My first name is Jonathan. I am 33. All it says is you can vote because, like I said, it's only going to run the first one that is true. This part's true, so it says I can vote, and then it skips down to the very bottom, and then everything is complete. So we are done now. Get excited. All right, so based on this, I believe that we have done everything that you need in order to do your homework for class. If you have any problems, bring them up to me in Slack. If you are a random person on the internet, I hope this was a little bit useful.